Yes, hope all of us are doing fine. In this particular discussion, I'm going to look at the difference between metals, non-metals, and metalloids. And these are some of the classification of elements of the periodic table, which we had listed in our earlier introduction discussion. Now, in this case, I'm going to look at these three specific sets of classifications. And these are going to assist us distinguish between 8 of these three categories in case we come across them in our various discussions on especially the physical and chemical properties. Now in this case, I'm going to have this one perhaps given in a tabular form, and we're going to give their specific characteristics in summary form so that we can distinguish them in case we come across them, as I've said in our various discussions, so especially on the concept of their properties and reactions. Now in this case, we are going to have this one given us, of course, metals, non-metals, and metalloids. And as we said, metalloids are going to be a category of elements which are going to display characteristics of either metals and non-metals, and they're going to be elements which are in between metals and non-metals. Now in this case, we have listed some of the characteristics of metals, and these are going to assist us in trying to differentiate between metals and these other elements which are falling in between metals and non-metals, and of course non-metals are given as such. Now, one of the characteristics which I mentioned on the concept of metals is that they are malleable, and this basically refers to the ability to be, of course, bounded into sheets, and this is going to be displayed as one of the characteristics of metals. Now, in this case, we're going to give a general set of characteristics, and of course, they may not be applying to all other elements, especially of metallic character and perhaps of non-metallic character given as such. So in this case, this is a general characteristic for all the elements which are going to be given as metals. And then next, we're going to see that these particular metals are going to be ductile. And this aspect of ductility is basically referring to the aspect of them being, of course, drawn into wires. And this is going to be one of the distinguishable characteristics of this particular elements that we, or group of elements that we refer to as metals. Now, again, we're going to see that they are going to be good conductors of both heat and electricity. And this is one of the unique characteristics that we're going to see being distinguishing them from non-metals and metalloids. Of course, this we're going to see as well, they're going to be good conductors of electricity, but to some degree they are going to display some characteristics which are going to be, of course, exhibiting a group of or other characteristics similar to the non-metals given as such. Now, this is going to be also displaying the aspect of high density as compared to the other two groups which we have given on right side of the board. Now, they are also going to have high melting and boiling points. And of course, this is due to their ability of being this hard or high density kind of course, elements. And then physically, they're going to be shiny and of course hard in nature. So therefore, these are some of the properties which we are going to come across for these metals or metallic elements in our periodic table. Now, for non-metals, one of the distinguishing characteristics that they're going to be brittle, and this, of course, is going to be the ability of or the easiness to break of, as I can give it in a rough description of this specific group of non-metals. And then they're going to be poor conductors of heat and electricity. And this is going to be a contrary or rather a characteristic which is going to distinguish them from metals which are basically good conductors of heat and electricity. So these are going to be poor conductors of heat and electricity. And then of course we're going to see that unlike metals, they are going to display this aspect of low density. So this is going to be low density compared to perhaps metals and non-metals or metalloids, as we're going to see later. And then they are going to be having the lower boiling points and melting points in that specific respect. And as we're going to see, of course, a variety of elements in the periodic table are going to be, of course, of this non-metallic category are going to fall under the the, of course, classification of gases like nitrogen, oxygen, of course, and other elements which we're going to see later, like chlorine, etc. And in this case also, we're going to see that for the metalloids, these, as we see, are going to be elements which are going to display both the metallic and the non-metallic character. And of course, some are going to be shiny. So as we said, this specific, of course, characteristics are not going to be displayed by all elements, and therefore some of the metalloids which we're going to come across are going to be shiny, where others are not going to be displaying this specific property. Of course, they're going to be brittle, and this, of course, is one of the characteristic of the non-metallic elements which are listed in the middle part of the table, and therefore that's going to be one of the similarities between this one and the non-metal, while this one is going to be displaying one of the aspects of course, metals, which is going to be characteristics of being shiny. Now, they are going to have a high boiling and melting point, and this is going to be one of the similar characteristics which we have mentioned, especially for metals in that specific case. So they are going to display a metallic character given as such. And then next, we're going to see that just like metals, they're going to be displaying the aspect of high density. And this is going to be similar characteristic, and of course contrasting it with the non-metallic character given as such. Now, they are going to be semiconductors, which basically means they're either going to be, they're going to conduct electricity in some degree, but not as fully as electricity, of course, which is going to be fully conducting this heat and, of course, electricity given as such. And therefore, they're going to be somewhere in between the metals and non-metals. Now, these are some of list, but not all, some of the characteristics which we're going to be witnessing being displayed by these three specific range of course, elements. And we're going to expand on them in case we come across them by a set of individual sets of different groups and periods as we're going to come across them. So that is it for now. Kindly check our description boxes for various links of other videos which we're going to do after this. And of course, they're going to be consisting of topics under a similar discussion. So that is it for now, guys. By God bless you. Catch us in our next video.